Your command echoes still, General, and I obey, as I did at Malachor 5.
If you've been watching a lot of our Old Republic content, you've probably heard one name come up again and again, Malachor. It's a name that lurks on the edges of many Star Wars stories, always conveying a sense of dread. The very word sounds like a curse. It's used as a curse, in fact, in Star Wars The Clone Wars. But what was Malachor? What's the story behind that nightmarish planet and the battle that took place there? In this video, we will at last be discussing this topic. It's the tale of the most terrible battle the Star Wars universe ever saw, a battle that spawned 1,000 horrors to plague the galaxy, the Battle of Malachor 5.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
We go now, my master, to that dark place which made you. Where you gained your ship, your troops. Your ship, my prison, that you dragged from the gravity well at Malachor 5.
The story starts many thousands of years before the fall of the Republic, before Dark Jedi conquered Korriban and proclaimed themselves Sith Lords. It's not known when the Sith Purebloods, the original Sith species, discovered Malachor 5, but it was one of their most ancient holdings, discovered not long after the Sith resettled to frigid Ziost. When the Sith Order we know it was founded 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, Malachor became one of its first outposts, a remote bastion on the very fringe of the nascent Sith Empire. In those days, even among the Sith, Malachor was shrouded in mystery and superstition. It was a dark side nexus, one of the strongest in the galaxy, rivaling even Korriban, but it was remote relative to the other Sith worlds, and there were many amongst the Sith who feared the planet. Even then, Malachor 5 was seen as a cursed planet, a taboo world that only brought trouble to those who trespassed there. The Mandalorians, when they discovered Malachor, developed similar taboos. But not everyone feared the curse of Malachor 5, some relished in it. The fanatical cult known as the True Sith claimed Malachor 5 for their own, establishing the Traya's Academy on the planet during the height of the Sith Empire. Their ideology was as extreme as Sith teachings could possibly get, and it left a scar on the planet. After the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY, the Sith Empire was destroyed, but the true Sith were not. Nonetheless, they abandoned Malachor and the Traya's Academy, leaving with Darth Vitiate for the unknown regions. But though Malachor was abandoned, the taint of the dark side remained even 1,000 years after the Sith had fled. It lingered in the Traya's Academy and spread to the rest of the planet, strengthening the dark side nexus there. The curse of Malachor 5 only worsened.
And all the Jedi who followed Revan, the true Jedi, died at Malachor 5.
As Malachor was becoming increasingly steeped in the dark side, the rest of the galaxy was busy tearing itself apart. The Great Sith War nearly destroyed the Jedi Order, and just a few decades later, the Mandalorian Wars threatened to do the same to the Republic. The Republic was saved by the intervention of the Revanchists, a group of rogue Jedi Crusaders led by Revan and Malak. The Revanchists helped the Republic push the Mandalorians back to the Outer Rim, but this came at a great cost to all involved. Both sides suffered extraordinarily high casualties, and the Revanchists began to succumb to the dark side. In 3960 BBY, as the Mandalorian Wars reached a climax, Revan and Malak discovered Malachor 5 deep in Mandalorian space. They rediscovered the Traya's Academy and were introduced to the teachings of the Sith, beginning them on the path to the dark side. Revan developed a sort of fascination with the planet, especially when he learned that the Mandalorians considered it taboo. By that point in the war, both sides were on the verge of collapse. The Republic had been nearly beaten to death, and its recent victories were due only to the leadership of Revan and his followers. The Revanchist fleet was in tatters, however, worn down to the bone by months of hard fighting. But the Mandalorians were on the brink as well. Though they were loath to admit it, the fact of the matter was that Revan had beaten them. Their ground forces had been wiped out at Altair 3, their fleet was just as tattered as the Republic's, and they had been territorially reduced to a few strongholds. Most of the Mandalorians that had fought in the wars were dead or had abandoned the cause, leaving only Mandalore the Ultimate and one last great fleet. Both sides were holding on for one last battle, one final bloody day. Revan, knowing that he had already won, began making plans for that battle after Altair 3. At this point, Revan was already planning beyond the Mandalorian Wars, foreseeing that he would be the next to campaign against the Republic. To this end, he designed a battle plan that would not only finish off the Mandalorians, but also any Jedi among the Revanchists that he didn't trust to follow him into the next war. He didn't have to think too hard to pick the battlefield where all this would take place. Together with Malak and his top general Mitra Surik, Revan laid out plans for the battle. Surik would take command of the largest fleet the Republic had left and lurk in orbit above Malachor, luring the Mandalorians in. When battle broke out, Revan and Malak would arrive with reinforcements and force the Mandalorians into battle on two fronts. To ensure victory, Revan gave Mitra Surik command of the Mass Shadow Generator, a superweapon designed by the Zabrak engineer Bao-Dur. The weapon was designed to harness gravitational anomalies present in the Malachor system to create a massive gravitational pull. Essentially, a much weaker version of a black hole, which Bao-Dur hoped could destroy the Mandalorian fleet if need be.
We will not surrender. We will not die, like we did on Malachor 5.
One terrible day in 3960 BBY, Mitra Surik rallied the Republic fleet above Malachor 5. It was the largest the Republic could muster, but it was in terrible shape. There weren't any intact warships left in virtually the entire Republic, and so the damaged ones had to be fielded. Revan assigned most of his potential threats to this fleet, including all of the Jedi whose loyalties he doubted. Unbeknownst to them, they had all been sentenced to death. As expected, the Mandalorians took the bait. Mandalore the Ultimate and the last of the Mandalorian fleet pounced on Surik's fleet, tearing into the worn-out ships like starved beasts. The Republic fought back as best it could, matching the Mandalorians for ferocity in a bitter fight for survival. With the exception of Revan and his fleet, neither side could expect reinforcements, nor could either of them turn and flee. All that remained of the Republic military had been rallied for the Battle of Malachor 5, and the words of Bao-Dur, beyond Malachor, there were no more Mandalorians left to die. Surik ordered her ships to hold, waiting for Revan and Malak to spring the trap, but they showed up late to the party. Mandalorian scout ships had delayed their fleet out system, leaving Surik and the Republic fleet hanging. They eventually made their appearance, boxing the Mandalorians in and tearing into their flanks, but for many of the Republic soldiers present in Surik's fleet, it was too late. Even as Malak oversaw the destruction of the Mandalorians' flanks and Revan boarded their flagship, the Mandalorians attacked the decoy fleet with single-minded fury. Aboard the Mandalorian flagship, Revan confronted Mandalore the Ultimate and fought him in single combat. After a ferocious battle, the Jedi Knight was victorious. He executed Mandalore and took his mask, preventing the Mandalorians from choosing a new Mandalore. Revan left the Mandalorians leaderless and let them tear themselves apart over the question of succession. But despite the fall of their leader, the Mandalorians had gained the upper hand in the battle and seemed poised to finish off the Republic fleet. With nowhere to run and little hope for survival, Mitra Surik believed she had no options but one. With a silent nod, she gave Bao-Dur the order to activate the Mass Shadow Generator. The weapon was far more devastating than expected. Bao-Dur had expected the Mass Shadow Generator to crush the Mandalorian fleet together, spaghettifying the Mandalorians aboard and forcing an end to the war. It did exactly that, and more. Most of the Republic fleet was also caught in the weapon's area of effect, as was Malachor 5. The planet itself was shattered by the activation of the weapon and smashed back together, compacting both the Mandalorian and Republic fleets into its crust. Thousands upon thousands of Mandalorians, Republic soldiers, and Jedi all experienced the most excruciating death imaginable in a single moment.
And she must be stopped, there, now, or she will bring the screams of Malachor 5 to the galaxy, just as we carry the echo all this way.
When the smoke cleared, scattered remnants of both fleets were left in orbit, though no ships were left intact. Revan, Malak, and Surik all survived, and they soon received messages of unconditional surrender from those Mandalorians left alive. The surviving Mandalorians were stripped of their weapons and armor and scattered, defeated, and disgraced. The Republic, technically, was victorious, though it had suffered terrible casualties of similar magnitude to the Mandalorians. In the aftermath of the battle, Revan, Malak, and their remaining followers ventured off into the unknown regions, and the Republic was left to rebuild. But what mattered most about the Battle of Malachor 5 wasn't its tactical outcome, but the effect it had on the Force. The mass death caused by the activation of the mass shadow generator, combined with the existing dark taint of the planet, tore open a massive wound in the Force. Malachor had been a cursed world before, but after the battle, it had become something unimaginably terrible. It became an unstable ball of charred black rock with destroyed warships embedded in its crust, racked by constant storms and earthquakes, orbited by a colossal graveyard. The dark taint of the Traeus Academy and the wound in the Force caused by the battle amplified each other. To those who could feel the Force, the planet itself screamed with thousands of voices, forever echoing the agony of those who had died there. This horrific wound in the Force didn't stay concentrated on Malachor 5 either. It was said that, to Force sensitives, the end of the Mandalorian Wars could be heard from the far side of the galaxy. Like a severed artery, the wound of Malachor throbbed, sending echoes out across the galaxy, twisting life and worsening the horrors of war. There were some who carried out these echoes within them. Meetra Surik had to cut herself off from the Force to survive Malachor 5, creating a wound within her that was incredibly linked to the one at Malachor. There were also other, fouler beings that drew their strength from Malachor 5 and became part of its shadow. Darth Nihilus and Darth Sion were the greatest among them. Both Sith Lords drew terrible power from the planet's wound. Nihilus, in time, became little more than a physical manifestation of Malachor's corruption. Throughout the Jedi Civil War and the Dark Wars, Malachor 5 continued to plague the galaxy, spawning new Sith threats. The wound continued to fester. It could only be healed by the one who had torn it open, Meetra Surik. In 3951 BBY, nearly a full decade after the battle, Meetra Surik returned to Malachor 5 to confront what she had done on that dark day and to put an end to the Sith Triumvirate. During a mission there, Bao-Dur, who was traveling with her, had the mass shadow generator rearmed and prepared to fire again. Once Surik had defeated the Sith, healed the Force wound within herself, and was ready to leave, the weapon was again activated. This time, it destroyed Malachor 5 completely. With Surik reaching closure and the planet destroyed, the wound in the Force was closed, and the nightmare of Malachor 5 ended at last. So that's the full story of the Battle of Malachor 5, the most terrible battle in the history of the Star Wars universe. But what do you think? Have you been waiting for this video, and are there others like it that you'd like to see? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.